If you have a Bible, if you will open it to Matthew chapter 5, we're going to look at verses 21 through 24, just a few verses. It's familiar subject matter for you and for all of us, but it's a topic that I feel it needs to be said frequently, particularly in the current environment in our country and perhaps maybe around the world. But Jesus is going to reframe our thinking about a topic that we're all familiar with, and it's the topic of anger. And so let's read what he has to say about it as he reframes this for us and kind of gives us a glimpse of how to carry this out in a practical way. Verse 21, chapter 5 of Matthew, and I'm reading from a New Living Translation. You have heard that our ancestors were told, you must not murder. If you commit murder, you're subject to judgment. But I say, if you're even angry with someone, you're subject to judgment. If you call someone an idiot, you're in judgment. You're in danger of being brought before the court. And if you curse someone, you are in danger of the fires of hell. So if you're presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice there at the altar, go and be reconciled to that person, then come back and offer your sacrifice to God. Ephesians chapter 4, we get another version of this touchy topic, and it says this. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26 and 27. When you get angry, do not sin. And be sure to stop being angry before the end of the day. Do not give the devil a way to defeat you. It's interesting what Jesus was doing here in this phrase. He's not in any way saying that the law, which has told us do not murder, is not valid or in any way diminished. He's simply saying that is the law, clearly. But let me reframe this for you, he says. There are some steps that lead to the subject of murder, so let's look at how we handle ourselves when we get angry. I got to thinking about this, and it seems like if you trace all the crime, and particularly all the murders, at the end of the day, somebody has lost their life or someone has taken someone's life because they're angry. In some way, they're angry enough, they do not want that person around any longer. They're going to kind of give their own punishment to whatever injury they feel. And I don't think I need to tell you that right now, I believe our world is just angry. Our country is just angry, and I get tired of turning on, I've stopped watching it really. I don't need others' opinions of what might be said or has been said. Just give me the facts, and that takes about 3 minutes. And then the other 57 minutes is just keeping things going so they can sell commercial time. So that was awful. That was just, my anger was coming out there, just seeping out there, So I like to turn it off and say, I'm not going to watch your commercials. So, but it seems to me the theme that I see on pretty much on most talk shows and news shows, what little I watch, reading less and less, it seems like in the newspapers these days, but everybody's angry. Everybody's got a cause, and they're angry that their cause is not embraced or their view of it is not embraced. And we used to kind of agree to disagree. We used to kind of have a country that had the ability to be cordial and understand each other, make room for each other, and those days are gone. Now we're angry. It's either my way or not, and if I don't get my way, then I'm angry at anybody that keeps me from getting my way. So clearly, we're well acquainted with the subject of anger. This isn't anything new to anybody in our rooms today. But I think it's important for us to be reminded that those of us who would say we are followers of Jesus Christ, we have to handle this topic very differently than everybody else. This is a great moment for us, folks. I think this is a golden moment for the church to be different. This is a perfect moment in our history, in our culture. This is a perfect moment in our country for us to be seen for what we claim we believe. And that means while other people are getting angry, and our tendency would be to get angry with them, that's not what we do as followers of Jesus. So we're going to have a look at what Jesus has called us to do here and how we're supposed to how we're supposed to handle anger. Anger, by definition, is a feeling of displeasure and hostility resulting from injury, treatment, or opposition. Somewhere all of our anger, everything that gets us angry, whether it's just a little bit angry or really, really angry, is going to come from some sort of injury. Something's been said, something's been done that I really don't like. Something's been said that I feel is a mistreatment. Someone's opposing me in some matter, and they're using anger to get their approach attention over what I might think is the need of the hour. So you get the drill. You know what happens and how it kind of escalates, that we are going to handle anger. So Jesus is teaching us the Old Testament law made clear, you shall not murder. But he says, but I tell you, let me reframe this for you. Everyone who's angry with a brother is liable to judgment, and whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council. I think that's out of the NIV or ESV translation. Now, I don't usually spend too much time on that last verse or two of this text where they're insulting people. And Jesus says in the NIV, you probably have the word raka. I think it uses the term for us here if you're presenting, let's go back a verse, if you call someone a fool or if you call someone an idiot. The raka is that word that is used in a lot of the translations. It's more close to probably the Greek intent. To call a person raka was to say they're empty-headed. Very insulting. I think we can go back to that day, and there's some symbol of some basic decency that existed in the culture. I mean, Jewish law and Jewish history had some sense of basic decency underlying it in those days. They weren't all friendly. That didn't mean they didn't get angry, but there was still some sense of the right and wrong of how we handle ourselves with other people. Jewish law kind of printed that path for us. But to call a man raka was to say empty-headed. Now remember that in Jewish times, in the Hebrew world, a person's name was very important. A lot of attention had been given to giving a child a name. I mean, that's another sermon. Go through and look at all the different names that were given to people, how God would rename people at times after there'd been a significant work of God in their lives. So and I think of Barnabas. Barnabas was named Barnabas because it means encouragement. Somehow his parents felt led to give him that name, or they assumed this kid's going to be an encourager. But those names were really important. So when you call someone a raka, when you say empty-headed, or the next thing Jesus says, if you call someone a fool, it was highly insulting. Still is. I mean, let's not forget, it's still very insulting. In fact, these words, if you trace particularly the word fool back, even to some of its Greek roots, that's where the word moron comes from. I shouldn't say that because I don't remember everything anymore. So I've had a lot of fun joking with my kids, or sometimes saying, what a moron. You're being a moron. Dad, you're being a moron. You know, we kind of throw that word around. It's not that big a deal. But boy, I had no idea the biblical implications of it, you know. I can't do that anymore. I don't want to hurt my kids and ding their spirit or anything. But it's really a very unkind accusation. And so here's what Jesus is saying as he starts talking to us about anger. He says, you watch what you call somebody. You watch the words you use. Because just saying those kinds of words about another person is not godly. That's not what God would have us do. And these were serious accusations, and the consequences of saying that, of insulting people, the consequences were very painful. So Jesus reframes it. He says it's not just murder that's wrong. It's the anger and behavior that leads to it. Anger is serious, you know that. Surely you do. I think we forget it sometimes. It's not a sin, but it can quickly become sinful. And I think we have to remember it's a God-given emotion. God can use anger for good. There are times it's a good thing. So James chapter 1, verse 19 really gives us a great simple statement. It's worthy of memory. You must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. Now the question is how? There's a right way to be angry and a wrong way. There's an appropriate way to be angry and an inappropriate way. There's a constructive way to be angry and a destructive way to be angry. And again, anger is not a sin. It's a God-given emotion. God in the Old Testament, God himself got angry 375 times in the Old Testament. I didn't spend the time counting all those. I read that word was in there 375 times. Jesus got angry. And the truth is, if you don't get angry, you may have a problem. Because it is a God-given emotion. It's a warning sign. It's supposed to be used to kind of shoot a flare into the air that says there's danger, be careful. There are times we need to get angry. There are times that getting angry means I care. Now, I think it's so easy for us to forget we're talking about being angry, not how we do it. We'll talk about that in a minute. But there are times getting angry means I care. I care. Sometimes we get into frustration. It's a very deep frustration at times, and if we're not watching it, if we don't reframe it there, it's going to turn into anger. And then it's going to be a little tougher to get it reframed and back in its proper context. I mean, I started making a list of things that exist today, organizations that exist because somebody got angry in a good way. Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Many, many years ago, moms got angry. Just got angry because their kids were getting in all kinds of trouble with alcohol, even losing their lives because of drunk driving. And out of that anger came a solution. I think of the various organizations, some that we support, are helping people when they've been abused. When a child, I tell you one thing that gets me really angry really fast is child abuse. I'll be honest with you, that if I ever witnessed it, just so you'll know, if we're ever witnessing this, you're going to have to hold me down because I'm going to completely go berserk if I see a child being abused. I can't imagine what I would do, but I know there's something in me that, boy, if that ever gets where it shouldn't go, it's going to be ugly. I got to watch that. I got to keep reframing it. But there are people who got tired of this happening in our culture. They said, we're going to do something about this. And they start offering ways to deal with children and help kids and adults who've been abused in some way begin to heal. Same thing with addiction. Let's go way back to Wilberforce, who got angry. He said, slavery cannot exist in this country. It should not exist anywhere. It's not biblical. It's not godly. He got angry and he put an end to it. At least he made the first step toward that direction, for sure. I think of people who go through cancer and they can either get really angry with God or they can channel that anger into helping people who've got cancer. We've got a ministry we support in this church, Tenaciously Teal. Tara had a serious battle with cancer. Young gal, nearly took her life. She survived, but she made an observation when she was in getting chemotherapy in the oncology unit. She said, there's so many things we could use, just really simple things we just don't know we need when we're getting chemo that would be so helpful while we're sitting there in our treatments. And it wasn't necessarily anger, but instead of getting angry at cancer, instead of getting mad at God, she said, I've got to help people. If I need this, surely somebody else needs this. And now she has a ministry delivering goodie bags to oncology units, every one in the city, I think, and it's spread beyond Oklahoma City to help people have some basic things that are so helpful when you're taking treatment for cancer and other things. So sometimes when we get angry a little bit, when we get troubled in our spirit, God may want to use that to do something constructive, to do something good. So let's look briefly at why do we get angry. Let's look for a minute at some of the triggers. Why do we get angry? One, I think we feel misunderstood. I think there are times we just simply feel misunderstood. Maybe I've got a thought or an idea, or I see something that I think is useful and it seems like a no-brainer to me, but there seems to be people around me who don't think so. Now, I've learned I've got good people around me, and if these good people around me on my team say that, we don't think that's a good idea, I go, okay, that's all right. Because I happen to know if you don't get buy-in from a lot of smart people around you, you're just running down the wrong trail. But we often feel misunderstood, particularly in relationships. I just don't feel like I'm being understood here. I don't feel like you're able to walk in my shoes right now. I don't feel like you're getting what I really feel or what I'm experiencing. We feel misunderstood. And sometimes it can get really frustrating, and if we don't carefully reframe it quickly, it can turn into anger. I think another thing that gets us angry is when we feel taken for granted. We feel somebody is using you, or another word, when we feel manipulated. We feel somebody is trying to manipulate us or use us for their own personal goal or to get something done that they want done, and they're putting the pressure on us. And I don't know how you feel, but that is one of those triggers for me. If I feel I'm being manipulated, hey, if you will do this, here's what will happen. Boy, it causes me some trouble. So I've got to quickly reframe it and say, this person probably is, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. They are coming at this because they think this is the only way to get something done. This is the only way they've ever known how to get something they want, is be manipulative and try to go down certain roads. In some cases, you don't need to go down. But you know how it feels if you feel misunderstood, if you feel taken for granted, if you feel manipulated. What about falsely accused? Man, these days, it's hard to know what to believe. It's just hard to know who to believe anymore. Now, in some ways, the culture is adjusting to some realities that have long been too much in the dark side and the offices and the back rooms of places where the abuse that has been taking place, especially for women, it has now come to light, and it needed to. So I'm not going down that road. That's not what I mean by that. But I am just saying, I now realize, and I've said to several friends of mine, that the problem we have not necessarily is what the accusation is that it no longer has to be true to damage people, to damage an organization. It doesn't have to be true, which is very frightening. Being falsely accused. And then, man, we go on down the road here of what happens in relationships, particularly marriages, when there are unmet needs. We go into marriage expecting certain things are going to be good for us or be a part of the marriage. We learn quickly that our ideas probably about marriage weren't completely clear. But there's still a tendency often in marriages, that's why so many marriages get into trouble, is because they start ignoring the basic things each other need in order to be good husbands and wives. In order for us to be fulfilled as people. That's why God gave us marriage. That's why God gave us this relationship. But what happens so often is we go from soulmates to roommates. And then trying to get a roommate back to soulmate can be a little challenging. Oh, it's done. It can be done. Too many give up there, but it can be done. And it needs to be done. And truthfully, there's another reason I find that people are angry. They don't know why they're angry. People are angry, they don't know why they're angry. I had the privilege of speaking at a men's conference Friday night up in just south of Chicago at Olivet Nazarene University. What an incredible university. What an amazing campus, and president of that campus. I mean, it was just some great friendships that I established with some people that I was so thankful for. So I spoke to the men's conference, but then the speaker on Friday night was a young man, African-American man, who'd come through the university. They found him in a junior college. His SAT scores weren't good enough to get into any colleges, but somehow this ministry-minded Christian college, I'm on the board at Anderson, we're the same way. Most of our Christian universities are trying very hard to not just look at a score and mark somebody off. And they saw something in this young man they felt was worth giving him a chance. They were doing one of those fairs at a community college where kids will come to the booths and inquire about getting into college or what their options might be. It's an incredible story this young man told. He's now married with 3 kids, traveling the country, speaking to audiences of all kinds about what God did in his life. But he started telling his story. I was starting to get angry at the people in his world. I kind of wanted to go find him and help him hurt him. So how could people do that? He never knew his father. When he was 3 years old, his mother was murdered. They live on that terrible east side of Chicago, or wherever that part of Chicago is that we kind of hear about every week. His mother was murdered. He was 3 years old. He hardly remembers it. And then his mother's sister, his aunt, was murdered. Separate time. So grandma, mom, these girls' mother, ends up with their kids' children. Grandma is raising 5 children on welfare in government housing in Chicago. This kid was never supposed to be standing in front of us, according to the culture. But God had a plan. Somebody stepped up. Must have been that admissions person standing at that booth for the college and the university, because they said, I want to try to help you get into our school. And they did. And now they bring him back to speak every year on campus. was amazing. But he said he grew up so angry. He didn't know how angry he was. He didn't know why he was angry. He just was angry. It was such a normal, emotional condition of his. He had no idea. And he was into the gang thing, and he was into the selling the drugs and all that came with it. It was an astounding story. But when he made that comment, I realized I'd been angry. I just didn't know how angry I was or why or how serious anger is. There's a lot of reasons we get angry. And we typically handle anger in a few ways. I think Jesus is calling us to reframe this for a minute. Before we let anger get out of its banks, we need to kind of reframe this situation in front of us, and we've got to do it quickly. You know, I've been saying several weeks, I picked up the comment, I think started back in August, when I said, you know, you can't prepare for a test when it's in front of you. So if we're going to reframe it, we've got to be prepared to reframe it. Because what we typically do in handling anger, a couple of things, we'll either suppress it. We think, well, I can't go anywhere with this anger, so I'm going to somehow bite my tongue, grit my teeth, and just hold it in and hope it'll go away. And it might for a while, but it'll always be laying there because it hasn't been dealt with. And one day it's going to come out. Because you'll keep piling stuff on it if you're suppressing it. You'll just keep piling more anger and more anger and more anger. And one day, you're going to be shocked at yourself. People around you are going to be stunned when it finally just comes out. And it's going to be ugly. Sometimes we release it in an inappropriate way. Say things we shouldn't say, do things we shouldn't do. Sometimes we just engage in this passive-aggressive behavior. I may not say much, but I'm going to make you pay. I'll make you pay with my ignoring you. I'll make you pay with what I'm going to say about you. I'll make you pay. So how do we deal with anger? A couple of quick things. Ephesians 4, 31 and 32. It says this: get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ forgave you. What can you just imagine what this world would look like if everybody professing to follow Jesus Christ would just be committed to that very last sentence of Ephesians 4:32. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other as you have been forgiven. You would think we would be the most widely known people in the world for that cause right there. But we're not. Now, I think we're pretty good at it, thankfully. I may be a little arrogant. Maybe that's another sermon, a little cocky about my church, because I think it's a pretty amazing group of people. And I think we do a lot of forgiving around here. And we do a lot of reaching out to people who've been where some of us have been. I love seeing what happens here, and you all make it happen. And I'm very, very thankful to be a part of a church like this. I'd be a part of it whether I was up here or back there. It's just amazing what we get to do here in this place. But you'd be amazed at how many places don't experience this. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other just as in Christ God forgave you. So how do we deal with anger? Here's the best thing I can tell you. When we're not angry, that's when you deal with it. Don't wait till you're angry. You can't study for the test if it's in front of you. You've got to study before you face it. You've got to study and be ready. The next time something's coming at me and I know what my tendency is going to be, I've got to be ready to reframe it for a moment. Somebody being unkind to me, I've got to reframe it, because hurting people tend to hurt people, you know. I've got to reframe that really quick. Somebody's angry and I just happen to be the closest thing standing there. Otherwise, I'm going to just fire right back. You got to reframe it. You got to identify what is it that makes you angry. Not everything makes me angry. A couple of things do. When children are abused, that's one of them. There are others, but I'm not going to tell you that right now. I'll tell you that on my last Sunday here. It's a long time coming too, you know. I may not remember them by then, I don't know. We identify what the trigger is. Psalm 4, don't sin by letting anger control you. Think about it overnight and remain silent. Oh, dear Lord, if we could just learn to be patient and wait to respond. And And then I think the second thing that's really important in dealing with anger is we've got to evaluate anger-filled relationships. We've got to do that. There's another way I think we can deal with anger, and that is we talk it out with somebody. Can I tell you this, as a pastor, maybe angry is too strong a term, but I certainly get so frustrated when I know people need help in fractured relationships and they're unwilling to seek help to work through it. There's times I want to say, what are you thinking? If you had cancer and you could be cured by 6 weeks of chemotherapy, wouldn't you take it? If the solution's available, why wouldn't we do whatever it is a solution to one of our problems would be? Why not? And so I say to people frequently who are in serious relational conflicts, families in conflict, couples in conflict, parents and children in conflict. And when I'm asked, frankly, I don't get asked that much anymore because we have such great ministries that everybody knows are available to handle those kinds of things. And our care series on Monday nights, and certainly some different groups of the week, counseling center here. Why aren't we talking about this? If we're dealing with anger in a relationship, if we've had a breach in a family and somebody got hurt and because somebody did something wrong, I mean, I'm not saying there's no one at fault here. There is somebody at fault. Somebody said something they shouldn't have said, did something they shouldn't have done, and there's then this break in a family. And I always say particularly to parents, but anybody in families, the long-term implications of holding on to this are disastrous. I will promise you in a family, let's find ways to prayerfully get things resolved quickly. It can be done. Now, I'm not saying quickly like today, tomorrow, this week. It may take a year, but at least work through it. The implications are terrifying. Proverbs 12 says, fools think their own ways right, but the wise listen to advice. Proverbs 13, where there is strife, there's pride, but wisdom is found in those who take advice. Proverbs 19, get all the advice and instruction you can so you'll be wise the rest of your life. So I guess if there's anger issues in relationships and families, and there's a whole lot more of it than I even know about going on in all of our services today and beyond, that would be the most thing I can encourage you the most would be talk it out. You don't have to carry this by yourself. There are reasons we get angry. And the Bible gives us real clarity on how to be angry and not sin. Back to James. You must all be quick to listen, slow to speak. That's where I got to watch it. I'm a talker. And slow to get angry. Human anger does not produce the righteousness God desires, and we all know that. That's nothing new to anybody in the room. It's just doing it. And I think Jesus gives us a great opportunity to get things reframed so we might go about this in a way he would be pleased. 1 Corinthians 13, we typically read it at weddings. It really wasn't written for weddings. It works at weddings, but we sometimes think 1 Corinthians 13 is just for married people. People getting married, you know. It's for all of us, for all time. But verse 5 of 1 Corinthians 13 says this, love is not easily angered. Genuine love is not easily angered. So how can I get angry at a relative that may have hurt you? How can you get angry and hold on to it? Yes, I know there's boundaries. There are times we have to draw fine lines, and it will cause a season of difficulty. Henry Cloud, one of my favorites, says this about anger. Anger lets you know that something is wrong. It lets you know there's a problem. So use the anger to solve the problem, not hurt a person. Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intention of throwing it at someone else, but you're the only one who really gets burned. There's a prayer on the back of your sermon note page. I'm going to ask everybody in all our rooms right now if you will take your worship folder out. It's on the back, on the sermon note page provided every week on your worship folder. And I'm going to ask you if you will take that out. And we're going to read this prayer together. And then after I pray, certainly feel the freedom that to go to the front of the room. The prayer teams will be available to you. I'll ask them to go ahead and begin coming toward the front of every room now. And then once we pray, they'll be available to you. So let's stand together. We're going to read this prayer together. And then we will bring a close to our service and allow those who need prayer to utilize the room or those prayer folks up at the front of every room. All right, let's read it together. Ready? Read it with me. Here we go. This is our prayer. Here we go. Dear God, getting angry is so easy for me. I'm impatient and often want people to immediately respond to my needs. I struggle with this emotion when people cut in line or slow in traffic and a host of other situations. Holding grudges and having strong desires to get even with those who have hurt me or taken advantage of me are nothing new. Sometimes I just clam up and don't want to talk. Other times I let my venom out on others, usually the people in my own family. Lord, I'm tired of being angry. I'm tired of holding resentments. I'm tired of feeling alone. How desperately I need you to come to my aid and help me tame the tiger of anger. Help me take responsibility for my thoughts and actions. Amen and amen.